Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. This is kind of a follow-up to the previous video I'd made, which was called The Love Addiction, which was put in a different series. It's in the Cognitive Therapy or Cognitive Distortions series, and I was thinking about it, and it might be confusing to hear the information provided in that video and then compare that to the others. So I figured I would bring up a few points I noticed after revisiting this very chapter in David Byrne's book, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy. It reminded me of a few pieces of important information, which the video's already been made about this chapter, which I will provide the link in case you just ended up here randomly and don't know what's going on, just so you'll have a point of reference. Something I realized is, let's say at one time in your life you do experience depression, which is what the other series is regarding, something that I had gone through like a long time ago, but remember how it fit in with other happenings and figured that should be addressed. Well, one thing I noticed is during that process, I was reading this Burns book at the recommendation of a therapist, and it's easy to read through such a book, which is designed to help you. But as you're reading, you're discovering things like this love addiction, which you may apply to yourself if you perhaps thought you had to have some partner or something in order to be happy, which luckily I've been happy with or without, but some don't feel that way. Well, this love addiction chapter, you got to be careful, because it's tempting to read this and then you may encounter a cluster B monster / narcissistic personality disordered person, and their behaviors may lead you, if you in your past read this type of book, to think, oh, I know all about that, and you may get the feeling that you're dealing with someone with a love addiction, when really they're love bombing you, trying to scam you so they can move in right away, but you may be put under the false impression that they're a real person, and after reading such a book as this, you'll think, oh, I can recognize what's going on here, and you might try to take steps to tell them, I know you think that you're in love, but it's really that you just feel this way according to and it doesn't work. It's not the same thing. With the narcissistic monster, it's a scam to get you reeled in. This book is not about narcissism, but it's about depression. And I understand the part about the love addiction where you may think, I've got to have someone in order to be validated, which is really not a healthy way to be, but it's the way many people are. And then you may confuse a narcissistic monster with such an individual when really it's a whole entirely different story. So be careful if you do come into contact with a love bomber and you think, oh, this person's just a love addicted person. It's probably not if they have the other red flags of the narcissistic personality disorder. Just keep your mind open if you do come across someone, because I've made that mistake before. I've seen certain behaviors and thought, this is one of those love addicted ones. Little did I realize that same person had at least 4 or 5 other storylines going on at the same time, similar to mine, which would not be compatible with mine with the information I was given in my compartment, but that's too complicated to get into. So what this chapter is focusing on is telling you that you're depressed now and you're alone and you feel you must have someone else to get rid of this depression. You could also extend that to maybe you were involved with someone and then now you're not. You may feel the depression because of that. But the author here Burns is analyzing your own behavior and determining if you are capable of being independent, if you want to be independent, or if you want to be dependent, and it's telling you how to weigh the pros and cons. But I can't help but think of how, after reading all this and then meeting a person who was displaying behaviors that made it seem as if it may be a love-addicted person. And I think, oh, I've got some help for you, listen here. And it wasn't that at all. It was simply a different tactic that happened to resemble the tactics I was reading about in this book. Now, in the book, it's for a real person who's real, but with this character, it's not real. And it resembles the same thing, but it's not the same. So while Dr. Burns is telling us, the readers, to decide if we're happy on our own or with another person or both, which are lessons I learned long ago, don't leave your happiness in somebody else's hands, because that's a power they can abuse, and many times will. But it's easy if you're a person who has emotions, who has empathy, and so on. It's tempting, if you meet someone who's displaying a certain situation, to want to help and say, look, I've studied it. Well, if you're dealing with the cluster B person, your information, your advice, your suggestions will be falling on deaf ears, because this person's got their own agenda going on, and part of that agenda is to act as if they are a certain way. So when you spend your time studying things like this book here and try to apply it to them, it just does not go together, because you're using reality against an actor or actress, and doesn't work. And as far as the story about Roberta, I could relate to her story after being like on my own for many years and then being with a person for a long time. The brain switches gears, and while it may be happy with the aloneness, well, then once another person's introduced, then all of a sudden it becomes adapted to being with another person. And then when that ends through discard or problem, it's common to remember those good old days with the partner there all the time. And the thing is, in my situation, I was able to master both. So if I was on my own forever, it was great. And if I was with a person, it was great. But then it is difficult if you're with a person for a while and alter your behaviors for the longest time, and then they're gone. It's kind of an adjustment to get back to the original, because you kind of like crossed over, it seems. But with the Roberta story, she was convinced she couldn't be happy unless she had someone, which I suppose I felt that temporarily afterwards, but at the same time, which I found interesting, was the later part in the chapter where Dr. Burns talks about when Janet goes on her own to some type of event and finds more pleasure than she would have had she dragged her evil husband along. When you're with a narcissistic personality monster, you gotta be careful too, because though it's hard to tell sometimes, because let's say that the art gallery is your passion and you just love it, and you happen to mention to this love-bombing fake narcissist person, I just love the art gallery, and it says, oh, I'd love to take you. Well, you might be tempted to think, wow, and you rave and ravage on all the paintings or artworks, and the other person is like, oh, wow, acting and interested. It's easy for you to think, oh, I'm showing someone else something that they're enjoying. It could be phony. And when you find yourself involved with the narcissistic personality person, what typically happens is events such as that at the art gallery will at first seem perfect, and you'll think, wow, we're so in sync. But later, if you stick around with this person, you say, hey, there's a new art show, let's go, and you'll be hearing, oh, I don't want to go. And you eventually determine that he or she only went to the art show to impress me, and the reality is it has no interest. It just wanted to sink its hooks in. So it's difficult to accept when you find the person that you built your foundation with, thinking that they had similar interests and thinking you were making progress by showing someone something they had never seen before. Really, it was a scam just to get close to you. And then now that you're settled in, you're like, hey, remember the time we went to the art gallery? Well, let's go to this new. I don't want to. That's typical, and it can happen. But they were talking about Janet and how she went to the dancing class and became so happy on her own and radiated such energy that it attracted people to her. Of course, the book doesn't mention what I would suggest, which is be careful of what's attracted to her, because it very well could be a narcissistic personality disordered person, which ties into the other series, but it's very possible. So, poor Janet, be careful.
Oh, yes, I must admit, in the church group that you drugged me to, even though I pretended to be devout Christian.
It was me who told the secret about what you had said about some of the other chicks.
Yes, it was me, even though I pretended to be shy.
I pretended to be out of place when you weren't watching.
I was spreading the gossip, and it worked. We got you all to break up your friendship, and quite frankly, I did that on purpose because
They were taking up a little bit too much of your time. Time that was meant for me, and it worked. So, I was pretty good at that. I couldn't have them interfering in my time with you. So, I did what I had to do. I'm sure you understand.
let's face it, I am the only one for you.
I never did mine.
I never
About the little
did
thing.
mine. About the little
I never did mine.
Say
About
it!
the little thing.
Say